and we are going to go ahead and get started. So today's webinar is over setting up your Sandata EVV system. Before we get started, we're going to go ahead and do a sound test. So we are testing sound at this time. If for those who would not be able to hear my voice right now, hopefully they'd be able to see on the slide where to find this webinar at a later time, just in case they're not able to get the voice or the audio to work throughout today's webinar. And for those of you who can hear me, great. Hopefully you're able to see the screen as well and you're good to go. Another housekeeping item here, all attendees have been put on mute for today's webinar, but you are able to ask questions. And to ask a question, you can select the Q&A option that shows up in the webinar bar, and you would type your question in the box that is provided. Your instructor and the EVV team will answer as many questions as possible during the time allotted at the end of today's webinar. And please keep in mind that because there was such great interest in today's topic and we have a lot of registrants, we are going to limit today's questions to the topics that are covered in the webinar. One final housekeeping item. For easier viewing today, you may click the Enter Full Screen button in the webinar window to make the presentation larger on your screen. If you have made your presentation larger by using that Enter Full Screen option, and you would like to get back to the window where the Q&A box displays, you may hover over the top middle of your screen, and that will pop up that webinar bar. Then you can click View Options, and finally Exit Full Screen, and that will bring that webinar window back to a smaller size so that you can access any additional boxes or items on your computer. The agenda of topics that we're going to cover today include where to retrieve your login credentials to the Sandata system, that Sandata EVV system, logging into the Sandata EVV system for the first time, setting up users if applicable, setting up employees if applicable, and setting up clients. And I want to pause for just a moment just to share with everyone that today's webinar is intended for all providers. So that includes both agency and non-agency providers. Where it says, if applicable, these are pieces of setting up the EVV system that would apply primarily to agency providers. However, everybody must know how to retrieve their login credentials, log into the system for the first time, and set up their clients. So while there are a couple sections here that apply only to agencies, there is still content that applies to all providers today. So I just wanted to give everyone a heads up to that. We're going to start off by reviewing how you would retrieve your Sandata credentials, and you would do this through a portal called eTRAC. eTRAC is the portal where you would not only register to log in and retrieve your credentials and other information to use the Sandata EVV system, but it is also the portal where you can send support requests to the EVV provider hotline or receive answers back from the EVV provider hotline. And you may also request EVV devices that are provisioned by the ODM program. If you would prefer to use an ODM provision device over the bring your own device model, or in other words, downloading the Sandata Mobile Connect application on your own smartphone. So there are several purposes for this eTRAC portal, but the primary one for what we're talking about today is so that you can get your initial login credentials and you can set up your Sandata EVV system. Now there are two ways to register in the eTRAC portal. The first is as the very first person to register in eTRAC, and this would be if you are from an agency. So an agency might have multiple people with accounts in eTRAC so that they can have multiple people requesting devices or handling support requests. So in that case, there is a first user logging into or registering in eTRAC versus any additional users. Non-agency providers, you are the first and the only person or provider who is expected to register under your provider account and manage support requests and any other information for you in eTRAC. All right, so the process we're about to cover is for any independent provider, so this is how you register, and then for agencies, this is how the first person in your agency would register. And of course, it starts by navigating to the eTRAC portal, and that is by going to etraconline.net. That web address is currently up on the screen, and it's going to pull up the screenshot that you're currently looking at. So it'll be a login page with a place to put in your email address and password if you already have an account. If not, you would click register. Once you do click register, you're going to be asked to put in your Ohio Department of Medicaid issued provider Medicaid ID. And this is exactly 7 digits. So you would put that into the field provided, and then you would enter it one more time just to make sure that you have entered it correctly in the first field and that they match up. Now, if you don't know your ODM provider Medicaid ID, you can take a look at the steps to find that Medicaid ID through different payer portals or through other payers by taking a look at the linked presentation that's at the bottom of this slide. And basically what that is one of the most recent webinars that have been presented by ODM. It was called Building Blocks for Accessing EVV. This is the presentation itself that the link is for on your slide. But if you go to the ODM EVV Initiatives webpage, and that is at medicaid.ohio.gov/EVV, there is a webinar section on the right-hand side of the page, which contains the recorded webinar for Building Blocks for Accessing EVV, as well as this presentation. So you can also find the link for that there. But it walks you step by step through how to find your Medicaid provider ID if you don't already know what it is, because it is required for this eTRAC registration process. So once you put in your provider Medicaid ID and you confirm it one more time, you would click continue, and that will take you to the second piece of information that you must confirm in order to authenticate that you are the provider that you say you are. And that will get you registered or able to continue further in the registration process. Now, this second piece of information is where you would enter in the email address that is on file with the Ohio Department of Medicaid in the MITS portal. So that's that information system where claims can be submitted to ODM, but it's also where your provider information is managed and your Ohio Department of Medicaid Medicaid ID is. So the link that you currently see on this slide is to the MITS portal. You could either register for an account if you've never logged into MITS before, or log in and check and see what the contact information is on file for you under the service location area of MITS. The email address that is listed under service location in MITS is the one that has been sent to Sandata and is expected in eTRAC. So if the email address that you put in here does not match what's coming over from ODM, you would see the red message that's currently showing in this screenshot, that the email address you supplied does not match what is on file. Now, if you have tried to log into the MITS portal, or you're having any issues logging into the MITS portal to update that email address or check and see what one is on file, you would want to reach out to the ODM Provider Assistance Line at 1-800-686-1516, and they'll be able to help you work through that process. Just please keep in mind that when you do reach out to this ODM Provider Assistance Line, you will need your Medicaid provider ID in order for them to know who you are as a provider as well. Okay, so far, you've put in your Medicaid provider ID, the email address on file with ODM, and as long as when you click continue, the email address matches what is on file with ODM, you're going to get to the final page that you can fill out, which will ask you to confirm your agency name. Now, in eTRAC, agency is the generic term for every provider. even independent providers or non-agency providers. So in the agency name field, if you are an independent provider, you would have just your first and last name listed. Now this screen is asking you to just verify the name that should be listed for you as a provider. So as an independent provider, your first and last name. As an agency, you would want to confirm that the correct agency name is currently displaying for you. And then you have a place to put in your first and last name, your email address, and confirm your email address. Now the email address that's being asked for here is the one that you want to use to log into eTRAC. So if you are part of an agency, just as an example, and you aren't going to be using the email address that's on file with ODM to log into eTRAC and to communicate with the support team, this is where you can put in whatever other email address it is that you would like to use. You would just confirm that email, put in your contact phone number, your preferred contact phone number, and then you would set up and create your own password for eTRAC. Now there is a little question mark that's showing up next to the password field, and if you click on that, it will show you the password requirements. You'll enter your password, enter it again in the verify password field, and before you click register account, you would want to be sure to check the box that says, I confirm that I am a Medicaid provider and am authorized to use this system. Now, as long as you've gone through that process as an independent provider, you would be done. You would be set up in eTRAC, you'd be able to log in, and you would be able to look to retrieve your credentials. And I'm going to show you how to do that in just a moment. If you are an agency provider, you're not quite done. So you are the first user to log into and register in eTRAC, which makes you automatically the security administrator of eTRAC for your agency. So you are going to see an additional tab in eTRAC that additional users who register for your agency after you are not going to see. And on that security tab, which is currently called out in the screenshot on our screen, there is an eTRAC PIN that is listed. Now this is one final form of verification that would be used to ensure that any other person who wants to register to have access to your agency account here is somebody who should have access to your account, because you're going to possibly have individual information under your account when you request devices for them. So that's a key reason why you want to make sure that it is secure and only people you intend to have access are accessing eTRAC under your name or under your agency name. You'll also notice, and that PIN is very important, anybody else from your agency who needs or wants to register in eTRAC must have that 4-digit PIN to do so. But you'll also notice on the security tab that you're going to see an account list. So it will also show you any other person who has registered for an account in eTRAC the last time they logged in. There will be a little check mark indicating who is a security administrator under your account. Now, if you're the first person to register, you are by default, but you can have more than one security administrator. You would just reach out to the EVV provider hotline to assist you in setting that up. And then finally, there's a column on the right that says lock and unlock account. So if any additional people register for eTRAC from your agency and they try to log into their eTRAC account too many times and their account becomes locked for security, then you would be able to log into eTRAC, come to the security tab, and click the unlock account button to unlock them. Similarly, you can also manually lock an account for a staff member who has maybe left your agency and you no longer wish to have access to eTRAC. All right. Now, non-agency providers or independent providers, you would not see a security tab because the assumption is that you're the only person who would need access to eTRAC, so you don't really have a need to have a PIN and go through this final step. So I just want to note for any agencies who have logged in to take a look at this webinar today, for anybody else other than the first person to register in eTRAC, I just want to show you what the process will look like when they go to register. So this is registering an additional user for an agency. Now the first thing that they would do is click register on the eTRAC portal page. They would also have to put in the Medicaid provider ID and confirm it, because this is your first factor of authentication for who they say they are. They would also need to put in the email address that is on file with ODM. This is your second factor of authentication for who they say they are. And again, if they enter it incorrectly, you're going to see the red message here letting you know that it doesn't match what's on file with ODM and who they can reach out to. And finally, they're going to have this third factor of authentication, and that is the eTRAC PIN. So as a security administrator, you'd want to make sure they have this. If they get this screen, they know that they are not the security administrator, and they would need to obtain this from somebody else in the agency, the person who is the security admin. Now, if somebody does not know the identity of their security administrator, you may call the EVV provider hotline at 855-805-3505, and they will be able to tell you who that is, but they cannot see this 4-digit PIN. And that is for security reasons. Only your security administrator can see the PIN if you are an agency person trying to register as a user. The only thing that the provider hotline can do is reset your PIN, but then they still wouldn't be able to see it. So the key thing would be to ask them who the security admin is, and they can point you in the right direction. So a quick review of eTRAC registration here. You must register for the first time with the email address that is on file with ODM in their information technology system, or MIS. The first person to register an eTRAC for an agency is the eTRAC security administrator for that agency. And the security administrator is the only person who can see that agency's 4-digit PIN, so they have to be the one to share it with anybody else who registers after them. And they can also unlock a locked eTRAC account. And then finally, any additional person who registers an eTRAC can use their own email address to register. In fact, anybody can use their own email address to register. But you first must use the email address that's on file for you as a provider with ODM, and you do that for verification. And then any additional user must also put in that 4-digit PIN if they are part of an agency. Some things to keep in mind regarding eTRAC and communication. You may send emails to the EVV Provider Help Desk at any time. However, if you have not registered for the eTRAC system, your email address would not be able to be matched up with an eTRAC account. And the only way that the Provider Help Desk has to communicate back with you is through the secure messaging system that's in eTRAC. So you want to make sure you register in eTRAC. You want to make sure you're using an email address that you would check often, or that you get communication to and you'll see on a regular basis, because they will respond to all written communication through the eTRAC messaging system. And since you may not be logging into eTRAC on a regular basis, when you do receive a message back from the EVV Provider Help Desk through eTRAC, you will get a notification through the email address that you used to sign up. So you'll see something like you see on your screen right here. It's letting you know, hey, new eTRAC secure message. You have a new secure message in eTRAC. Please log into eTRAC to view that, and it tells you where to go. All right, so once you have registered for eTRAC and once you have logged in, you would want to retrieve your EVV credentials for the Sandata system, and we're going to review how to do that now. So the screenshot that's currently on the screen is what you would see once you log into the eTRAC portal. So you'll notice there's a home button, which is currently being displayed. The home page is being displayed in this screenshot. Just gives a little bit more information about eTRAC and the ODM EVV program. You also have tabs in this portal to request devices, see a list of devices that you have already requested. And just as a reminder, an EVV device can be requested for every individual to whom you provide EVV eligible services, but you do not have to request a device if you decide to download the Sandata Mobile Connect application onto your own smart device and log mobile visits that way. So the choice is yours, but if you have requested devices, you'd find them in the list of devices tab here. You should also see a welcome kit tab. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment, but other tabs you could see is the messages tab that we were just talking about, where you'd receive communication. The security tab, if you're part of an agency and you're the first person to log in. Again, non-agency or independent providers would not have a security tab because you wouldn't need it. And then finally, you'll have a logout tab. Now, I want to come back to that welcome kit tab, and in fact, I'm going to move forward so that you can see what would be listed on it. And a welcome kit is the term for the group of documents or information that you would need to get started in the Sandata EVV system and then to continue using it. So what's contained in that welcome kit tab are 4 call reference guides. Now those call reference guides walk you step through step how to log a visit using the Sandata telephony system. The Sandata EVV telephony system. So that's logging an EVV visit over the phone. You have a call reference guide that will walk you through how to log a group visit over the multi-language line. You have a call reference guide that will walk you through how to conduct a single visit over the multi-language line. And then you have a call reference guide that will walk you through how to conduct a group visit over the English line. And then one fourth and final call reference guide for how to conduct a TVV visit, a single visit over the English line. If you were to click on and download any of those call reference guides, and you'll see the download button on the right-hand side, when you open up that guide, the phone numbers that you would want to be using or need to be using to log your telephony visits are going to be in those guides. So they will both contain the prompts for how you would log that visit and what you can expect over that phone line as prompts, and they would contain the phone numbers that you would call to log a telephony visit. Another document that you would see in this welcome kit is the Getting Started booklet. It is a good review of key contact points if you have questions, key things to keep in mind about the program. It's just a little Getting Started booklet of information for you. It is not your welcome kit letter. We're getting to that in just a moment. The next document you're going to see is the service list. When you as a caregiver or caregivers as part of your organization go to provide services to an individual and they want to log that visit over telephony, there would need to be a 3-digit code entered over the telephony phone line to log a particular service that was provided. The service list that is part of your welcome kit contains all of the services that are part of the EVV program as of phase 2, and the 3-digit codes that are assigned to them that you would need to put into a telephony line to log a visit. So if you are looking for tools to equip caregiver staff with how to log visits over telephony, you would want to provide them with a call reference guide, the one most applicable to the services you provide in your staff, and a service list. And that would help them have the information they need to use that backup method for logging visits. The final document that you see on this welcome kit tab is the welcome kit letter. This is where you would find your initial login credentials to the EVV system. Before we go further, I do want to mention that the only way that you see this welcome kit tab, that this welcome kit tab is technically unlocked for you in your eTRAC account, is if the provider ID that's on file for you with ODM can be seen as having taken the required EVV training. So the Learning Management System, or LMS portal, that's provided by Sandata and contains the either registration for training and the instructor-led webinars and the classrooms that were available for training have all ended now. The last days for those were August 2nd. But you can still access self-paced training through LMS, and you must have taken the Ohio Department of Medicaid EVV training for phase 2, either as an agency or non-agency, to fulfill the minimum requirements for training for the program. If you either have not taken that training or when you registered for that training, your provider ID was incorrect or was not what was on file, didn't match what was on file with ODM, there is nothing to indicate in the eTRAC portal that you have taken that training, so your welcome kit would not be unlocked. Okay, so just to kind of boil that down and repeat, if you do not see your welcome kit tab here in eTRAC when you log in, the first thing you would want to check is the Learning Management System or LMS portal where training was to have been taken. Because if you've already registered in there to take training and you feel like you've already taken training, you'd want to check your profile to make sure that the provider Medicaid ID that you entered when you created your LMS profile is in fact the 7-digit Ohio Medicaid provider ID that is on file with ODM. And if it's not, you just want to go ahead and correct it and save that change. Once you do save that change of correcting the provider ID, it takes maybe 24 to 48 hours, but it will update eTRAC. The little flag that you've taken training will be tripped, and then your welcome kit would be available to you. All right, let's presume that the welcome kit tab is showing. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that welcome letter, one of the most important documents, looks like. So what's currently on your screen is what a welcome letter looks like, and called out in the red box are some of the most important pieces of information in that welcome letter. So it's going to tell you how to get to the Sandata EVV portal, what the web address is, and it's also going to tell you what your, again, agency is the same as provider in terms of terms here. So what your provider account number is for Sandata, what the username is that you must use the first time you log in, and what the temporary password is that accompanies that username, okay? The username that you see in your welcome letter is the one that is also on file with ODM. So this would be the same email address that you must have used to register in eTRAC to confirm that you are who you say you are as a provider. And even if this is not the email address that you want to use on a regular basis when you log into EVV, this is the one that you must use at least the first time that you log in. All right, now that we've taken a look at how to retrieve that welcome kit, how to take a look at what the credentials are to log in for the first time, the next thing that we're going to cover is logging into the EVV portal. And again, you would need the credentials from that welcome kit letter to do that. But if you were to follow the web address that's listed in your welcome kit letter, it would be evv.sandata.com, and you can access this through Internet Explorer, Mozilla Firefox, Google Chrome. Any of those browsers are fine to use when you're accessing the EVV portal. And the EVV portal allows for client or direct care worker data entry, paperless review of and management of EVV visits, and of course reporting as well. Now there are numbers that are calling out certain fields on this screen. Number 1 is pointing to the agency field. Only when you log into the EVV portal, so this is not talking about the mobile device at all, that's a separate set of login credentials. So only when you log into the EVV portal, you would address this agency field by putting in STX first, and then entering your Sandata assigned account number after that. So let's just say my account number is 9709. What I would put in here is STX 9709, all one word. The next field, number 2, is for your username. So this is where you would enter in the email address that you're currently using for your username. Now when you're logging into the EVV portal for the first time, this must be the username that is in your welcome kit letter. And then finally, number 3 here, the password field. This is the last field where you really enter information in, but this is where you would put the temporary password that was showing in your welcome kit letter. Now you may have noticed in that welcome kit letter that that temporary password expires after 60 days. So if it has been longer than 60 days since you've taken training, but you have not yet logged into the EVV portal, there is a possibility that your temporary password has expired. And if that's the case, notice on your screen here, there is a forgot password link that shows up beneath the login button. If you click that forgot password link, it is going to ask you to confirm that username that you want to send that temporary password to, but then it will send you a new temporary password to put in here. Now I skipped numbers 4 and 5. I want to cover those real quick. Number 4 is pointing to the Remember Me checkbox. So if you are the only person who's going to be logging into the EVV portal from the computer that you are on, you can check that Remember Me box, and the agency field and the username field will be filled out for you every time you come back to this portal to log in. And finally, you have number 5, which is the login button. Now we're going to put this into practice by logging into the EVV portal now. And I've brought up the login screen. Notice that in the agency field, and I had the Remember Me box checked before, so that's why our information is still here. But notice that agency field box has our STX and then account number 9709. That is a test account that we're logging into today. My username is saved and it's here for me, evvtraining@mailinator.com. So the only thing that I need to do now is put in my password. And log in. And you'll notice that the first thing that comes up when I log in is the Visit Maintenance page. That is always by default going to be the first page that you see every time that you log into the Sandata EVV portal. Now I want to go back here for just a moment to our slideshow, and the next slide is just showing you what you will see if you click the Forgot Password button. But one step that I did not have to do, because I have already previously logged into this test account, I did not have to reset my password. But when you are logging in for the first time and you put in your temporary password, you should get to this change password screen that will ask you to confirm your old password, which is that temporary password, and then choose a new one that you intend to use moving forward. For the new password, the requirements include that it must be at least 12 digits long, and it must include at least 1 capital letter, 1 lowercase letter, 1 number, and 1 special character. And although this note is going to be on the screen of the portal itself, I do want to note that your password is case sensitive. You want to make sure capital and lowercase letters are where you want them to be before you confirm your new password and before you click save. Okay. So let's go back to the portal now. And the next thing that we're going to cover is setting up users if applicable. And you'll notice along the left-hand side of the screen, there is a navigation bar with different options of things that you can do and things that you can see. And there are little collapsible arrows to the right of each option in that menu bar. So you have data entry, which we're going to be working in today's webinar to set up clients, and then for agencies to set up employees. And then you also have the security section. Now I'm going to jump back to the presentation here because there are a couple things that I want to review about a user. A user in the EVV portal is someone who's going to be logging in through the web page to manage the EVV system's data setup or visits on an ongoing basis. So this is different than somebody who uses a mobile device to log visits or telephony. This is more of an admin type user for agencies. And then non-agency providers, you are automatically a user and you have been set up according to your email address that's on file with ODM as a user. So you don't have to set up any additional user accounts. But agency providers would, because they only have one person set up by default, and that is through the email address that's on file with ODM. So for agency providers, you do need to set up additional users, and we're going to take a look at how to do that now. So I mentioned that you would look at this menu bar on the left-hand side, and there are different sections that you can take a look at. you would be looking at the security section to set up or manage your users. So I've clicked on the little arrow to the right of security and expanded that section. And right underneath it, there's an option to manage users. So if you click on manage users, you'll notice that the page on the right-hand side has a heading that is changed to tell you that you're currently in user management. And in user management, you're in the security portion and you are managing users. The first thing that shows up on the screen are filter boxes for you to search for a particular person who you may want to see if they've already been set up as a user. So maybe I type in the last name of Adams. I want to see if anybody by last name of Adams has been set up as a user, and I click search. Nope, no data found. So that's one way that you can see if you've already set someone up or somebody else has already set a person up as a user. Another way is just click search without any filters filled in, and it's going to show you all results, or in other words, everybody who currently has a user account for your agency. There are 7 entries showing up here right now, but none of them are the person that I want to set up. So in that case, you would go to the Create User button in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. When you click Create User, you'll be brought to the Create User page. And there's very minimal information to put in here. It's pretty quick. You'll notice that there's an asterisk next to this username or email field. You will notice throughout the page here that there will be an asterisk next to any field that is required to be filled out. So in this case, I'm going to say setting up webinar at mailinator.com is the username or email address that I want to use for this user. I want to set this user up with. I do need to confirm that username or email one more time. You could type it again. You can also copy and paste, which is what I'm going to do for time savings here. Put in the last name of that person, then put in the first name for that person, and then you can move forward. Notice there's a locked checkbox here on the left-hand side of the screen. It's grayed out right now because this user has not even been created just yet, but I will come back into a screen of a user who has been set up in just a moment to show you what you can do with that locked box. The next section that you come across is available roles. There are 3 that are currently showing here. There's the assistant coordinator role, the coordinator role, and a security admin. Now, the security admin role is what I'm currently logged in as. This is somebody who has not only access to manage visits and set up clients and employees under data entry, but also somebody who has access to create or manage users for your EVV portal account. If you want arrows to move that over to the right under assigned roles, and now you can see that this person has been assigned to the security admin role. You do not need to assign all 3 roles. If you work from the bottom of the list up, the security admin has all of the privileges that the coordinator and the assistant coordinator does. The coordinator has all the privileges of the assistant coordinator, so on and so forth. So it does have a hierarchy to the roles here. But I mentioned privileges. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll notice on the left-hand side of the screen, it says available privileges. And if we scroll through, these are all of the different functions that can be completed in the EVV portal. Now, not all of these functions apply to the ODM EVV program. For instance, billing and payroll is not part of the Ohio EVV program. So you'll see some privileges here that won't even apply. That is why you would assign a role and then keep on moving, because the privileges or the functions that a user might need to use have already been set up and wrapped up into these roles. You would assign either a role or privileges, but not both, and it's far easier to just select a role and then keep on going. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll further down so you can see what's remaining on the screen. And the only thing left on this screen is the supervisor section of the screen, which again is not part of the Ohio EVV program. So although in this test account we see some options here and there's a checkbox that says, yep, assigned to all, that supervisor functionality is not something that you would be using through the Ohio EVV program. So you can just skip it entirely. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and scroll up to the top of the screen, and you'll notice the Create User button is both at the top and the bottom, so you can click it anywhere. But since I have the email address, the name, and the role assigned to this person, I am ready to click Create User. And I get my green success box that says the user was created successfully. So I can close out of that green success box. All right, and you'll notice that the fields have been cleared on this screen, and this is so that I can go ahead and start filling them out to set up another user if I would like to, or otherwise I can go back to my Manage Users area here, and I can click Search. And you may have noticed before that there were 7 users who were set up under my agency. Now there are 8, and here is that Setting Up Webinar user that we just selected. Now remember that I said that that locked checkbox has a function. I'm going to show you what it is. Well, you'll notice in your list of users here, there is a column that says account status, and everybody says open right now, which means nobody is locked. But if any of these users try to log into the EVV portal 3 or more times with an incorrect account number in the agency field, incorrect username or email address, or incorrect password, then it will lock their account. Okay, so 3 is the magic number for the EVV portal. 3 or more times and an account becomes locked. Somebody who has access to this security module for the agency, anybody who has access to this, can come in and unlock that user. And you would do that by using this pencil under the action column. Our user now. And if they were locked, you would notice that this checkbox on the left-hand side was locked. And all you have to do is click it to unlock that account. And then you would click Modify User. Again, any other change that you want to make, because that edit functionality isn't just to unlock users. You can also change the role change the reset password button for this user, and they will receive a new temporary password through their email, the email address that is set up for their username, and they'll be able to reset their password. Now this person isn't locked, so I'm going to go ahead and go back to the Manage Users area, but that is one way that you can use that edit button and help your fellow colleagues out if you are part of an agency. Notice there's also a trash can to the right of that pencil, and it says delete this person. If you accidentally made a mistake in the email address when you were setting up a user, that is the only piece of information that is not editable after you set somebody up. So I'm actually going to go back into this Setting Up Webinar person. And you'll notice that I cannot. So if you do accidentally misspell an email as you're creating a user, the only thing that you can do really is delete that user and start again. All right. So that would cover our setting up users portion. And before we move on, for anybody who is a user and provider, or you're an agency provider, you forget your password and you want to reset it. If you click the Forgot My Password link that shows up underneath the login boxes on the initial EVV portal login screen, this is an example of the email that you're going to see and receive from Sandata in order to set up that, that new password. All right, so you're going to get a temporary password. You'll get a link to log in and change that password yourself. The next section we're going to cover is setting up employees. And again, this does say if applicable, because only agency providers need to set up employees. Non-agency providers, you have already been set up as an employee by Sandata, according to the information that is on file for you with ODM. So your employee email address is going to be the email address that is on file with ODM. For agencies, all of your employees must be set up using the process we're about to cover here, and you would want to set them up with whatever email address they would have access to most often, because that's an email address where temporary passwords are going to be set. Now, in order to set up employees, you would be navigating to the data entry module. And you'll notice if you click on the drop-down for data entry, this contains two sections of information that you can set up: clients and employees. We're going to go over employees first, but we're going to get to clients here in just a moment. So I am going to go back to the EVV portal to set up some employees here. So I'm going to collapse the security section on the left. We're done working with users. I'm going to click on the data entry section to open it up. Now, for any person who wants to be able to log visits in EVV, whether that's through the mobile device, over telephony, or even be attributed to a visit when it's created manually here through the EVV portal, anybody providing services must be set up as an employee. Even for an agency, if you want to, as an administrative person, conduct training with caregivers and you want to be able to log into the mobile device, if you already have a user account, you must also set up an employee account, because that's what will get you access to the mobile device and allow you to be added to visits as an employee. When you go to this employee section, you're going to notice a similar screen to the user management screen, and that is an area for you to search for employees and check and see if that person has already been set up in your system. This is a time-saving trick for you, because if you go through the whole create employee process, which isn't very lengthy, but if you go through it and that person already exists, you're just going to get a message telling you that that employee already exists. So by searching for them first, you can see if they are already in your list, save a little bit of time, and then you don't have to worry about finding out later that they already exist, moving on to the next person. Now, if you have already confirmed that the employee you want to set up is not already in your list of employees, you would click the Create Employee button. The first thing that you're going to see at the top of that Create Employee button is a basic section containing basic information that needs to be filled out for that employee. The key thing to pay attention to on this screen are the asterisks, because they will be next to any field that is required for this employee, which is not a lot of fields. So I'm going to start by filling out the first and last name. We will say, Ella, last name webinar. All right, so our employee, Ella Webinar. You'll notice through the fields here, the next field with an asterisk is the Social Security number. Now, a Social Security number is required for every employee who is set up in the Sandata EVV system, and any employee who is going to be listed on a visit in the Sandata aggregator. So that includes even, well, a system you're not using that's Sandata, but that's another topic. The reason why the Social Security number is required is because it is a unique identifier for every employee or every caregiver who would be providing visits in the state of Ohio. All right, so this is the best way to make sure that there is a unique identifier for any employee, and that is across providers. So maybe there's an employee working with several providers, their Social Security number is unique to them. The other item that is required in this basic section is the email address, and this is because the email address is going to be the username for this employee when they go to log visits in the EVV mobile device or in Sandata Mobile Connect. So you'd want to put in an email address for them that they would check or have access to in order to get temporary passwords. Now, once you type in the email address, you'll be asked to confirm it just to make sure you didn't mistype something by accident. And before I scroll down further, I'm going to go further to the right of this basic section because there's an employment section, which quite honestly you don't really use because department, discipline, pay rate, those are not elements that are currently being used in the Ohio EVV program, so you don't have to fill out those fields but there is this mobile user checkbox. And it is very important because in order for this employee to have access to the Sandata Mobile Connect application, or in other words, mobile visit verification, they must have this mobile user checkbox checked. Now, if you forget to check that box and you go to save this person as an employee, you're going to get a little pop-up reminder letting you know, hey, you didn't check this box. Are you sure you want to continue without this person being a mobile user? But it's just easier to just go ahead and check the box to begin with. Now, if I scroll down further on the page, there's additional information that you can put in for this employee. You can put in their address and their phone number, but none of these fields are required because this is all just information for you as an agency. And the assumption is that you probably have this information somewhere else, like a payroll system or another human resources system, so you would not have to fill it out. So when you're done with the required fields and you've checked your mobile user box, you can go ahead and click Save. You will get a save confirmation box saying you are going to save your changes. Are you sure you want to proceed? As long as you do, you would click OK. And you'll get your successful box flash there letting you know that this employee has been set up. Now you know they've been set up because you are now looking at an Edit Employee screen instead of Create Employee. You're also looking at the information that you just put in for this person, and on the right-hand side of the screen, there's an option to reset a mobile user password. You can't reset a password for somebody who hasn't been set up yet. You'll also notice that there's a TRAC ID that is currently showing up for this employee. That is a Sandata assigned identification number that is unique to this particular employee. And this is the ID that employees would need to enter over their telephony line to identify who they are as an employee when they are logging a visit through telephony. So that TRAC ID is important, so you'd want to make sure employees have that. And it shows up after you create the person. If they ever need their mobile user password reset, and they're struggling to do it on their own, you can come into their employee profile and click that Reset Mobile User Password button. However, I will let you know that employees can both unlock their mobile account and reset their passwords for that mobile account directly in the Sandata Mobile Connect application itself. They can do that by using the Forgot Password link, or if they've locked themselves out, they can click the Unlock Account link. And it will ask them to confirm the answers to their security questions that have been set up, and then it will allow them to go through those processes. So that is a self-service option that's available on the device, or you could reset their mobile user password here. Just keep in mind that when you reset a password for an employee, it is going to send them that temporary password via email, whereas if they reset their password on the device, they can answer their security questions, and that's all they need to do to get to the point where they can choose a new password. They don't have to access their email. All right, so that person is set up. If I click on the employees section again and click search and scroll down, if I need to edit this employee's information, I can use that pencil again that shows up to the right in the actions column. Let's say you have an employee who is no longer working for your agency and you don't want them to have access to EVV any longer. Then you would use the terminate icon, which is the trash can, to the right of their name under that actions column. And it says terminate, but really it means inactivate. Because if you've had this employee and they've logged visits, you wouldn't want to lose any of their information because they can be attributed to visits that have already been logged. So when you terminate somebody, and I'm going to say, yes, I want to terminate John Acosta. Really what you're saying is, I no longer want them to have access to the system and they are inactive. And to find any employee who has been made inactive, you would click on the inactive status and click search, and you would be able to find that person. So this is if you click that terminate button by accident, you can bring that person back. You would just look for your inactive employees and then click the reactivate button to the right of their name. All right, and it'll be asked for a reactivation date, and then you would save. I'm going to leave John as inactive. Okay, the last thing that we are going to cover today is setting up clients. This is the last thing that you would need to do other than getting logged into your EVV mobile device, but all of the data entry that you're doing here would set you up to do that. In order to be able to use the Sandata EVV system, the client entry is very, very important for agency and independent or non-agency providers, because if you don't ever set up your clients in the EVV system, number one, you will not be able to log visits for them in the Sandata Mobile Connect application. But also, if you try to log visits for them over telephony, you're going to have to resolve the unknown and client exception for that telephony visit every single time you use it, because it won't be able to find the client in your account because they haven't been set up. So it's very important. Here is a review of the key changes that have been made to client entry for phase 2. So these are some items that we're going to review today, as well as the entire client setup process. It includes the requirement to add applicable payers, programs, and services to the client's profile in EVV. There is also a newborn indicator checkbox that is available if you are working with a newborn client who does not yet have a Medicaid ID. I'll explain that further in just a little bit. You have the ability to add an alternate Medicaid ID, and you also have the ability to request EVV devices through the EVV portal itself. Now we are again going to go back to the EVV portal to step through this process. And this time we're going to be working under data entry and the clients section. If you click on clients, you're going to see a screen that's very similar to screens that we've been seeing already, which is the ability to search for clients who may already exist under your account. All right, so if you just click the search button, you can see anybody who already exists. I currently have 27 clients set up, only 20 of whom are currently showing because my page is only showing up to 20. I'm going to change that to 50. And if I scroll down, I can see that I've already set up Sarah Baker, so maybe I want to move on to somebody else. Also in this client list, you can see the client ID and the client Medicaid ID, both of which are very important. And we're going to talk about why in just a moment. But I don't see the client I want to set up, so instead, I'm going to go to the Create Client button in the upper right-hand corner. Now, just like screens that you've seen already in the EVV portal, any field that is required to be filled out for your client is going to have an asterisk next to it, that little star. So I'm going to put in the first name and the last name. And then the next field you see in the next row down, right underneath first name, is client ID. And I'm hovering over it right now, but I get a little warning sign basically telling me that I can't fill in anything in that field. That is because every client who gets set up in the EVV portal is going to have their own unique client ID assigned to them by the Sandata system. That client ID is the ID by which you can, it's one of the IDs by which you can search for and find a client in the Sandata Mobile Connect application. It is also the ID that you would put into the telephony line when you are logging a visit for this individual via telephony. So it's very important, but it gets assigned when this client gets saved as a new client. All right, so we won't see anything in that field just yet, and there's nothing to enter into it. So we're going to move on to the next field, which is the Medicaid ID number field. This is the Ohio Department of Medicaid issued Medicaid ID. And in most circumstances, every individual has one, at least one. In very few circumstances, and this is a 12-digit number, so I am making up a number at the moment, but you'll notice that it stopped entering digits for me when I hit the 12-digit limit, because it must be 12 digits. Every individual who receives Medicaid services has at least one Medicaid ID, or usually has at least one Medicaid ID. Some of them, in very few cases, have a second Medicaid ID. And that is why there is an alternate Medicaid ID field in this client profile. If you are working with an individual who is part of that small number who has a second Medicaid ID, you could go ahead and enter it into this field, and both will be recognized when it comes to claims verification for that client, or when you are searching for that client to set up a visit. There is a client other ID that shows up on this screen. This is where you could put any other client identifier that's not their Medicaid ID, and it's not an identifier that comes from a payer, like CareSource or a managed care organization. You are going to see other fields listed here, such as gender, email address. Language preference is a required field. I do want to point out by clicking on the drop down here that you have access to all 13 languages that are now available in phase 2 of the Ohio EVV program. So if your client speaks Fula, and that's how you want them to see the mobile device when you ask them to verify information, you'd want to change your language preference to Fula. Otherwise, English is the default. So while it's a required field, it also has a default. So it's easy to skip, but here's how you change the language preference for your individual. There's no other required fields in this basic section of information. You are also not required to fill out emergency contact information. These are just informational fields for you as a provider to fill out if you would like to. And notice that the newborn checkbox is here, but it's currently not available because I have information in my Medicaid ID field, okay? To indicate that this is a newborn, I would need to clear those out, and that would allow me to check that newborn box, indicating this is a newborn individual who has not yet been assigned a Medicaid ID. And when I check that box, it in fact grays out the Medicaid ID, letting you know that they don't have one, and you also don't have to enter one here. Instead, what you would do in the case of a newborn is you would add your payer, and you would add in the payer's identifier for that client. Now, adding payers is required. There's no asterisk next to this one, but it's required because in order to cut down the list of services that you have to select from when you log a visit, and in order to avoid the unauthorized service exception that can show up on visits, you want to add the payer into that client profile. So I'm going to click Add New to do that. We'll see our client name, Sally Training, see some basic information for that client, and then you see the payer drop-down field, which again has an asterisk, meaning it's required. Let's say that this individual has a payer of CareSource. The program is MyCare. I would select the proper program. And because I selected MyCare, what shows up in our service drop-down are all of the MyCare program services. So I could say personal care attendant. Now, the only other field that's required here is the start date field, but I already said that this is a newborn individual who doesn't have a Medicaid ID, so I would need to put in the client payer ID to identify this client somehow. All right, I just made up a number there, but that's what you would put in that field. There is also a start date field in this add payer box, and it is required. Now, the start date field is really talking about the date from which you would need to start logging EVV services for this individual. You don't have to go back years and years in records to find the first date that an individual might have been eligible to receive services by a certain payer for you as a provider. Instead, you're going to look at a date to when you started providing services in EVV. So maybe you went through training, maybe you started setting up your EVV portal July 2nd. You can go back to a start date of July 2nd. And from that date forward, you would be able to select MyCare Personal Care Attendant as a service that's applicable to this client. And I would click Add. Now, you may have noticed when I click Add that that payer now shows up in the list behind this box, but the box is still up on the screen so that if I need to select another payer for this individual, I can. So just in terms of setting up another payer, let's say I need to select the ODD, I select the program, select the service, and then the start date, which again, I'm going to select July 2nd, and click Add. So that has added a couple payers for me. If I am done adding payers, I can click cancel and close that box and see all of the payers that I have set up so far for this individual. Now let's say I checked that newborn box by accident. I was thinking of the wrong client that I was setting up here. I can go ahead and uncheck that box, put in the Medicaid ID that I have for this client, make sure my payer information still makes sense, but then continue on. So it's also very easy to correct if you have accidentally checked that box. Also, when your newborn individual does receive a Medicaid ID, you'd want to be sure to come back into the EVV portal, uncheck that box, and put in their Medicaid ID, because this is an individual identifier for this client or this individual when you're submitting claims. All right, so we have our payers set up. Now, if I need to go in and edit that payer information, or let's say that that client is no longer eligible to receive a certain service from you as a provider as of a certain date, you would click the pencil icon to edit that payer information, add an end date. I'm going to say yesterday, the 4th, and then save your change. All right. And then what you will see, well, we haven't even set up this client yet, but what you would see is that history link would become active, and you would be able to see this as a historical payer that was accessible for this particular client. There's also a copy payer function that shows up to the right. So let's say that this individual is receiving more than one service through my care program. I could click copy payer. I have care source and my care, my start date, and my client payer ID already filled out for me. All I need to do is select the additional service they might be receiving. Let's say it's home care attendant, and click add. So that's kind of a quick add function for adding additional payer services when you've already added. Now I'm going to scroll down just a little bit further on this clients tab, and you'll notice we have just a few more asterisks remaining for this client, and it's under the primary address section. So here you would want to select the type of address where this individual would most commonly receive services. Let's say it's in their home. You would want to fill in the address for that individual. That includes city and state and zip code. And let's say you have more than one address to add. If that's the case, you can click this View or Add Additional Addresses. And you would need to put in that information one more time. So it's a good idea to actually click that link from the start. But again, this is for those locations where you would commonly expect to be providing services for this individual. Right, so I clicked add, and here's the home address that I just added. Maybe this individual also receives services commonly at school. So I could also put in the school address. And click add. And if you need to edit those addresses after you've added them, you can click the little pencil to the right of them, or delete one if you made a mistake. But as long as you've added all the addresses that apply to this client, you can close that View or Add Addresses box, and you will see the link has 2 that can be viewed if I need to. The last section of the client entry field, or screen rather, is the phone number section. It does not have an asterisk, so it's not required, but it is recommended, and here's why. If you ever need to log a visit for this individual through telephony, and you expect to use their home phone number, and any phone with a dial tone will work, so it could even be a landline. If you put in the phone number for this individual that you expect to be logging telephony visits from, when you call into your telephony line from this number, it is going to recognize that it belongs to this client. So you won't have to put in the client ID because it already knows who the client is. So that's why it's recommended to put in a phone number here. I am making one up, so this should not be anybody's real number. But I'm going to go ahead and click add. But that is why it's not required, but it is advisable to go ahead and do that. Now there is a save button down here at the bottom of the screen, but there's also one at the top. So we're going to scroll up and review the key sections that were filled out. We entered a phone number. We've put in an address, at least one, for this individual. The importance of that address, by the way, is when you log visits through the mobile application, Sandata Mobile Connect, it is capturing the GPS coordinates of where you start and end that visit. And if you're starting or ending the visit from an address that is not known, or in other words, it's not in the client profile here, you are going to get a little flag on that GPS coordinates in the visit details in your EVV portal. So that's just letting you know that, hey, this is an address where we commonly expect to be providing services. All the payer information, the required identification information. So now we can click Save. We are going to get that Save confirmation box. Are you sure you want to save changes and proceed? I'm going to say, okay, I'm sure. All right, and our client was successfully created. Now we are in the Edit Client screen now, so if there's anything I needed to edit, we'd be good to go. I could go ahead and start editing. But this history link is now available under Client Payer History, so I could click on that and see that payers that I started and ended when I set this client up. You do not have to set up services or payers that no longer apply. By the way, that was just used as examples in today's training. Also, since we've created this client, the Request Mobile Device button is now available. So if you want to request a mobile device, if you intend to use the ODM provisioned mobile device for your client, you can request that device just by clicking that button. It is going to bring up all of the addresses that you have added for that individual so that you can select whichever one it is that you want the device to be sent to. And then you are also going to have a box for special shipping instructions. Now the note is already here, but you should never include any personal health information in this special shipping instructions box, because what you type in here is actually what will show up on the outside shipping label of the device box. The reason why you can type in special instructions is because maybe your individual has two entrances to their home, one on the front, one on the side. Maybe you want to let the delivery person to know to please use the side door when making a delivery. Okay, you could enter in your special instructions, or if you don't have any, leave that box blank and then click Complete Device Request. We have noticed that about 98% of device requests so far have been logged through the EVV portal. It is definitely one of the easier ways to request a device if you intend to use one, but you can also request your devices through the eTRAC portal. Now back on our slideshow here, I just want to point out that we do have some slides that are calling attention to some of those trickier pieces that we just reviewed, such as adding a payer or editing a payer. All right, so after this presentation, if you want to refer back to these pieces, you could go to the ODM EVV webpage, the webinar section, and this slide deck is going to be made available as well as the recording of today's webinar, and you would have these slides to refer back to. But the reason why I'm back in the presentation is because if you do not decide to request a device through the EVV portal, let's say you decide to request that device through eTRAC, there are just, if you are requesting a device for an individual who does not have a Medicaid ID. Okay, so if your individual has a Medicaid ID, you can request that device through eTRAC. You put in their Medicaid ID, you put in their address and special shipping instructions, and you would request it. So very similar information to requesting that device through the EVV portal. However, if they do not have a Medicaid ID, and the two cases that are most common for that are, let's say, the client for ODA, so they don't necessarily have a Medicaid ID, but they have a passport or PIMS ID for the client. This is an example where they don't have Medicaid ID, or if the client is a newborn, they wouldn't have a Medicaid ID. There are some special circumstances to requesting that device, and that is how you would address the Medicaid field. So if you don't have a Medicaid ID, this Medicaid field still shows up in eTRAC. So if you're requesting a device for a client with a PIMS ID only, you would want to put in a capital P that stands for PIMS, put in the actual PIMS ID, and then fill the rest of that required Medicaid field with zeros. And again, this is only if you're requesting a device through eTRAC. So an example of this would be capital P, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's say it's 7 digits for that PIMS ID, and then 4 zeros to make up the rest of that 12-digit required Medicaid ID. In the case of requesting a device for a newborn through eTRAC, if they don't have a Medicaid ID, you would first put in your Sandata EVV account number, then a capital N to indicate they are a newborn, then their EVV generated client ID, and then fill the rest in with zeros to make up the rest of that 12-digit field. So an example of this could be 6789 for the account number, capital N to indicate it's a newborn, the client ID, which is 0192, and then 3 zeros. Now, I know this is a lot of information to remember if you happen to have clients that meet this criteria. So again, I'd recommend requesting your device through the EVV portal, like I just showed you in the website. If you do want to request a device, because you can just go ahead and request that device as normal for either of these situations through the portal. Okay, we covered a lot of ground today, and hopefully it's been helpful to everybody on the line in knowing how to set up your Sandata EVV system and get started. But if you still have questions or issues on the process, who you would reach out to is the EVV provider hotline at 855-805-3505. If you've already registered in eTRAC, you can also reach out to them at EVV Provider Help Desk at etraconline.net. And then if you have any questions regarding the EVV program itself, so what services are included or something to do with the program, you can reach out to the EVV team at ODM, and you can do that through the email address evv@medicaid.ohio.gov. Okay, at this time, we are going to be reviewing that Q&A box that shows up in the webinar bar, and we're going to be reviewing it for any questions regarding today's webinar topic. Because of timing constraints and the high number of folks that we've had join today's webinar, we're going to have to keep our questions that we answer live over the phone limited to today's webinar's topic. And then any additional questions that you might have, please feel free to reach out to the EVV provider hotline. But we'll go ahead and take those questions at this time and then start answering them live over the phone. Okay, one of the questions that we've received is, can the employees use the agency's Medicaid number, or should they have their own Medicaid number? You do not need to enter a Medicaid ID for employees, so you don't have to use anyone's Medicaid number for them. Employees get set up using, they get assigned an employee ID. It's known as a TRAC ID by Sandata. So you don't set up employees with a Medicaid number, instead they get a Sandata assigned TRAC ID. Another question here is, what is the STX number that I need to put in? And I believe that is referring to the EVV login portal. So I'm going to go back to the login portal, and I'm actually going to log out. All right, so I believe you're referring to this first agency field, which is going to have STX filled in for you automatically. What you put in here is your Sandata EVV account number. And that's the number that you find in your welcome letter, in your welcome kit through eTRAC. So my account number that I've been using for training today is 9709. So how I address that agency field is STX 9709. Okay, we have another question come in. It says, I don't know my client identifier. There is a pretty easy way to find that. I'm going to go back to the portal here, and I'm going to log into it to take a look at the client section. Okay. You can, if you have a lot of clients that you work with, you can go to the reports section of the EVV portal and run the active clients report. It's actually the first report that shows up under this daily report section, which is here by default. Active clients also in here by default. And it is a daily time frame, which means you only submit one day. But if you submit the current day, you're submitting to view all active clients that you currently have set up in your system. And then you could go ahead and run reports. All right, so this is going to show you all the clients you have set up, and there is a column for the client ID that has been assigned by Sandata for that client, and that's the one that you use to log visits over telephony. You can also use that number to find your client in the mobile application. And it's also going to have the Medicaid ID listed for that client and the other information that you've entered for them. So this is a very quick and easy way to find a full list of your clients. If you also just want to spot check one or two people, you can go to data entry and the client section and click search. And that information is also showing up in the client ID and client Medicaid ID columns. But again, the client ID is the one that you would use when logging a visit through telephony for your client. There is another question here asking, how do we find the payer, and is that for every client? If you're asking how you find a payer that's been set up for a client already in EVV, you would find that by clicking the edit button to the right of the client and scrolling down, and you'd be able to see whether or not they've had any payer set up. If not, you can go to add new. All right, so one more time, if you go to the client section information for your, once your client comes up, you'd click the pencil to the right of them, and then you would be able to scroll down and see what payer information has been set up for them, and if you need to add any for them. Okay, we have a question here. It's a unique situation. We already have the device, and I'm trying to set my client up in Sandata and cannot because the system will not allow me to add a payer. And this is because I'm not allowed to scroll down all the way on the screen. The only time I've encountered that, and this is something that you might want to check, is when I am in a browser that is zoomed in a lot. It can change the ratio, kind of the viewing ratio of the website. So whatever browser you happen to be in, if you want to right click and see if you can zoom out, see what your zoom ratio is, if it's maybe 110, 120, 150%. If you're zoomed way in, it can change what you see on your screen. Also, if you are hooked up to monitors, if you're in an office setting and you're hooked up to the additional monitors, it can also kind of change the ratio, screen ratio, and what you're seeing. That's the only situation that I've seen where that's occurring. If you check either of those options and you're still not able to scroll down, please feel free to reach out to the EVV provider hotline at 855-805-3505 to take a closer look at that. We have another question here in terms of logging visits. Can we use both the mobile device, so that'd be your personal smartphone device where you've downloaded the Sandata Mobile Connect app, and the Sandata device? And I think what you mean is the ODM provision device. You could request a device on behalf of your individual and have it sent to them so it's in their home, just in case you forget your smartphone or you aren't able to use the Sandata Mobile Connect application on it. You can certainly have both options in place. Okay, one of the questions here is, my client is already set up for her LPN, but I can't seem to find her when I search for her on the device. If what you mean by that is that another provider has the client set up, you would not be able to find them because you have, if you're an independent provider, you have your own account to the Sandata EVV system. And any clients that you want to provide services to must be set up under your account. If another provider, let's say that LPN, has the client set up, that's great. She's going to use her account number and log in and search for the client and find her, but you also need the client set up under your account using the steps that we reviewed in today's webinar. Another question here is, how do I get my company ID to log into my device? Your company ID is actually your Sandata account number, so that's the same account number that you would use to log into the EVV portal. It's just in the MVV application, or in the Sandata Mobile Connect application, instead of putting in SDX and then your account number, you would always put in 2- and then your account number. So anytime you're logging into the MVV mobile device, it is 2- your account number. So today I've been using the account number 9709. If I were to go and try to log into a mobile device, I would put in 2-9709 as my company ID. And just as a quick reminder, you can find that Sandata account number in your welcome letter, in your welcome kit, in the eTRAC portal. Okay, another question. I've been an independent provider for several years. When putting in a start date for my clients, I have several clients that I've been providing services to for several years. And I think the question is, what do you use as the start date? That start date really only applies to the EVV system. It's not going to be used in claims validation or anything else. So you'd want to put in a start date from which you expect to be logging EVV services. So if you're setting up your client today, maybe you put in your start date a couple weeks ago. If you Right, there's another question here. What if two people are independent providers for the same person? Do you have to use a different EVV system? And I think by different EVV system, you're asking, do you have to use a different account number when logging into the device? You can use the same device, so both independent providers can use the same device to log their visits. But when you log in as an independent provider, the company ID would have a 2- and your account number, username, and password. The other independent provider would log into that device using their account number. All right, so you can both use the device to log visits, but you need to be in your own account numbers in EVV. Otherwise, the visit is not going to be logged under your account to be used in claims validation. And to show up for you as a provider. One of the questions here is, I didn't get a welcome kit or a welcome packet. How do I get my information to log in? You would need to reach out to the EVV provider hotline at 855-805-3505. But before you do that, please be sure to log into LMS, or the Learning Management System, and verify the provider ID that you have listed for your login profile there. Because if your provider ID is not the 7-digit Ohio Medicaid provider ID, or if it's entered incorrectly, then you won't be able to be shown as having taken the training in eTRAC, and your welcome kit would not be unlocked. That would be a key reason why you wouldn't be able to see it. So you want to verify that the provider ID you have in LMS is correct before you reach out to the support line. If it's not correct, you would just change the number and save the change. and then give it about 24 to 48 hours for that welcome kit to be unlocked, for that provider ID to be updated and sent over to eTRAC, and then for that welcome kit to be unlocked. Okay, one of the questions here is I put in the wrong start date when adding a payer. I can change this in the edit clients, right? Yes, yes you can. So if you edit the client and then scroll down to the payer section, in fact, I'm still on that screen. And let's just add a payer here real quick so that you can see what this looks like. All right, so let's say I added my start date as 8/1, but I wanted to add that start date as, let's say 8/4 or further back. Let's say I wanted to make it in July. You would click the pencil to the right of Edit Payer, and then just use the calendar next to start date to change the start date. So I saved that change, and now it is July 2nd. Okay, one of the questions here is my client is on an IO waiver through DODD. Would DODD be the payer? Yes, DODD would be the payer in that situation. It just as another example, if your client is on a passport program, then ODA would be the payer. There are some programs like state plan where there can be multiple payers, but IO waiver is one that's specifically through DODD. So there you go. There's a question here, what is the web address for eTRAC? It is eTRAC, that's eTRAC, online.net. So eTRAConline.net, and eTRAC is spelled eTRAC. Okay, one of the questions here is, in case I don't get the EVV unit before, and that's the EVV device, before I take out a client, so I have to download to use telephony. So telephony is referring to an EVV visit that is logged over the telephone, and the phone number that you would call and the process that you would use can be found in the call reference guides that are part of your welcome kit in eTRAC. So downloading all of the documents in your welcome kit is an important step in having all the information you need to use EVV. Those call reference guides and then the service list of service codes that you would type in over the phone are the important pieces to have in your back pocket if you think you may need to use telephony, or to have anyway, just in case you can use telephony as a backup in case using the mobile application doesn't work for some reason or another at a given time. A key reason why providers have reported that they have to use telephony is if they are using an EVV device in the client's home and it's not available. Telephony would be your backup in that case. Another question here is, I have a married couple, and even though I ordered 2 EVV devices, are 2 devices needed, or can I use one for both of them? You can use one device for both people. Every time a provider logs into the device, they're logging into their account under their username. They'd only be able to find clients that they provide services to. If you are providing services to both of them and you've set up both of them as clients under your account, you can just use one device to log those visits. This question doesn't necessarily pertain to today's topics, but I think it's probably a question that a lot of providers have had, so I want to go ahead and answer it. The question is, do I still have to go on the Department of Medicaid and submit my claims? Nothing about your billing process has changed with EVV. Everything remains exactly the same. So you still want to continue to submit claims the same way you always have. Okay, so one of the questions is about the client payer ID, and that is when you're adding payers for a client and what to put in that field. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the screen here so that you can see this. So when you do click Add New, whatever payer that you set up for this particular client, you are always going to see this client payer ID field. It's not required because you don't have to put anything into that field, except for, and this is the only situation, if you are setting up a newborn client who does not have a Medicaid ID, or if you're setting up, let's say, a passport client for the Ohio Department of Aging who does not have a Medicaid ID. Generally, the only time you'd have to use this field is when you're setting up a payer for a client who doesn't have a Medicaid ID. Then you would want to put in the client payer ID so that you have some information to be matched with this client in the claims matching process or the claims validation process. If you've already put in a Medicaid ID for this client, and we can see for Peter Adams we would not have to put anything into that field. Okay, it doesn't look like we've had any further questions coming in at this time. I'm going to give just a few moments more And then we are going to end today's webinar. There's one additional question that has come in here. What is the phone number for EVV? So if you're trying to log a visit or you need to log a visit through telephony, the phone numbers that you use are going to be specifically assigned to you if you're an agency. There's also a specific set of phone numbers for non-agency providers to use. And where you find those phone numbers is in the call reference guide of your welcome kit. So you'd want to go into eTRAC, go to your Welcome Kit tab, and download those call reference guides, and the phone numbers are going to be listed in those. Okay, there's a question coming in about searching for clients. And if you could clarify by typing into the Q&A, are you talking about searching for clients in the EVV portal or the MVV device, or the EVV device, because it makes a difference? But the question is, are we searching for the ones we take care of? The answer to that question is yes. You are only searching for the clients that you have set up and that you are providing services to. The next question is, if so, I don't have her client ID. I've tried searching by name and nothing shows up. So if you are searching for your client in the mobile application, Sandata Mobile Connect, searching by last name is not one of the search criteria you can use. You can only use client ID or client Medicaid ID. Medicaid ID might be easier if you already know that. If not, you can find both in the EVV portal as long as you've set up your client. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate away from the page on the screen that I was on before and click the search button in this client section. And you'll notice for Peter Adams, for instance, our first client, there's a column for client ID. Oops, accidentally clicked it for me. But that client ID is the Sandata assigned client ID that you can use to search and find your client in the device. Or you can type in the client Medicaid ID to search and find the client in the device. But both of these values you can look up pretty easily in the EVV portal under the client section. Okay, we had a follow-up question here. I tried to log in today, and since I wasn't able to find her in the system in the EVV device, I logged an unknown visit. Okay, that's a viable way that you can log that visit until you can find her and get her information. That's fine. I need to know if I use her Medicaid number, and if she does not show up, what do I do? Yes, you can use her Medicaid number to find her in the EVV device. If you are typing in her Medicaid number in the device and you're sure you're typing it in correctly and it still won't pull up your client, chances are you might have mistyped her Medicaid ID in the client portal, in the EVV portal under the client section. We've actually seen this throughout phase 1 several times with providers. Since you are manually filling in that Medicaid number for your client when you set them up, if they mix 2 numbers up or accidentally put an extra number in there, what have you, if you entered it wrong into the client setup page, when you type it in correctly in the device, that's a key reason why you wouldn't be able to find them. So you just want to go back and double check in the EVV portal for the clients you have set up that number 1, you set them up, and number 2, that the information you put in for them is correct. Okay, at this time, we are out of time, so we are going to go ahead and close the webinar down. But as a friendly reminder, you can find this as a recorded presentation. It will be on the OEM EVV Initiatives webpage, and that is medicaid.ohio.gov/EVV. And you will find it under the webinar section on the right-hand side of that page. This recording is going to be posted probably tomorrow morning by end of business tomorrow, probably tomorrow, you should be able to find this recorded presentation. Thank you everyone for taking the time to join today, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your evening.